The mountain teaches you one lesson over and over. Nothing arrives when you expect it. Not storms, not spring, not the ninth woman I sent for, and definitely not the courage to believe she'd stay. I was checking the north trap line when I heard it. Not the steady creak of wagon wheels climbing the switchback trail I'd carved 6 years ago. This was different. Sharp. Wrong. The sound of wood splintering under too much weight. I ran. The November air cut like broken glass in my lungs. My boots slipped on frost-covered rocks. But I didn't slow down. Something in that sound, that terrible crack of breaking wood, told me someone was about to die. And I'd heard enough death on this mountain to recognize its voice. When I came around the bend, my chest tightened. The mail wagon hung at a 45-degree angle, front axle shattered clean through. The left wheel dangled over empty air, nothing but 300 feet of cliff face below it. The horses screamed and thrashed, still in harness, their weight the only thing keeping the whole mess from sliding into the void. Old Caleb Thompson sat pinned in the driver's seat, his leg twisted at an angle that turned my stomach. Blood darkened his trouser leg. His face had gone the color of old snow, and in the back of the wagon, visible through the torn canvas, someone moved. I didn't think. 6 years alone on this mountain had taught me that thinking gets people killed. Action is what saves lives when anything can save them at all. I hit the wagon at a dead run, grabbing the side rail to stop its slide. My boots dug into loose shale. For one terrible second I felt the whole thing start to tip, taking me with it. Then it held. Caleb's eyes found mine. The pain in them was so raw I had to look away. "Get out," he whispered. His voice barely carried over the wind. "Someone's in back. Get them out first." I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him I'd free him first because that's what you do for a man who's been driving supplies up your mountain for 6 years, who never once complained about the isolation or the danger or the fact that I made him haul 8 different women to my door and then haul most of them back down again. But the wagon shifted, just an inch, just enough to tell me we had minutes, not hours. I pulled myself up and over the side rail, moving as carefully as a man defusing a bomb. Every shift of weight made the wagon groan. The horses screamed louder. The canvas was shredded where the cargo had shifted. I tore it back and looked inside. A woman stared back at me. Not a girl, not some delicate thing who'd faint at the sight of blood. A woman, full-grown, powerful. She crouched in the chaos of scattered supplies and broken crates, one hand braced against the wagon wall, the other clutching a trunk that looked older than both of us. She was the biggest woman I'd ever seen, 6 feet tall if she was an inch, and she wasn't apologizing for it. Broad shoulders that strained the seams of her wool dress, arms thick with muscle, hands that looked like they could break rock. She had Chinese features, sharp and striking, with black hair pulled back so tight it made her cheekbones stand out like knife edges. Her eyes were dark as mountain lakes at midnight, and they didn't blink when they met mine. Those eyes assessed me the way I assessed wounded animals, measuring, calculating, deciding if I was worth the risk of trusting. "Can you splint a broken leg?" she said. Her voice was low and steady, with just the faintest accent clipping the consonants. She didn't ask it like a question. She asked it like a test. I blinked. "What?" "The driver. His leg is broken. Probably the tibia, maybe the fibula too. Can you splint it or do I need to do it myself?" I stared at her. The wagon shifted again. A terrible groaning sound came from somewhere deep in the wood frame. "We don't have time for this," she said. She pushed past me, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone her size. The wagon rocked with her weight. I grabbed her arm. "Wait. If you move too fast, we'll both go over." She looked down at my hand on her arm, then back up at my face. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Not fear. Something colder. Calculation. "Then we move carefully," she said. "But we move. That man is going into shock, and we have maybe 10 minutes before this wagon takes all of us down that cliff, so you can either help me or get out of my way, but I'm not leaving him to die." She pulled her arm free and climbed out of the wagon with the kind of controlled movement that comes from years of hard work. Every step was deliberate, every shift of weight measured. She moved like someone who'd spent a lifetime being told she was too big, too heavy, too much, and had learned to make herself small in all the ways that mattered. But there was nothing small about the way she dropped to her knees beside Caleb and started examining his leg. I followed her out, my mind racing. This was supposed to be Adeline Chen, the woman from the agency in San Francisco, the one who'd written 3 letters in careful script telling me about her experience with cooking and sewing and keeping house. Sweet words, gentle words, the kind of words that promised a woman who'd be grateful for the chance to escape the city, who'd see my mountain cabin as a step up instead of a prison. This woman looked like she could arm wrestle the mountain and win. "I need fabric for a splint," she said without looking up. "Something rigid, 2 pieces of wood, straight as you can find, and something to tie it with. Rope, leather strips, anything strong." I scrambled to obey. There was something in her voice that made arguing impossible. I tore boards from a broken crate, ripped strips from the canvas covering, moved like my life depended on it. Because it did. The wind picked up. Dark clouds rolled over the peaks to the north. I could smell snow coming. If we didn't get Caleb stable and get off this ledge in the next few minutes, the storm would kill us all. I handed her the supplies. She took them without a word and set to work. What happened next made me understand that this woman, whoever she really was, had done this before. She cut Caleb's trouser leg open with a knife she pulled from her boot. The blade was worn smooth from years of use. She examined the break with fingers that probed gently but firmly, and Caleb's screams turned my stomach. "Tibia's fractured," she said calmly, like she was discussing the weather. "Clean break, thank God. No compound fracture. But the fibula's damaged too." She looked up at me. "I'm going to set it. Hold him down." I moved to Caleb's shoulders. His eyes rolled white with pain. I'd seen men shot, seen men frozen, seen men torn apart by bears. But there's something about bone breaks that cuts through you different. Something more intimate in the violence of it. The woman positioned the splint boards on either side of Caleb's leg. She looked at him, and her face softened just slightly. "This is going to hurt," she said. "I'm sorry. But if I don't set it now, you'll lose the leg to infection. Bite down on this." She handed him a leather strap. Caleb took it with shaking hands. Then she pulled. The sound of bone grinding back into place is something I'll hear in nightmares for the rest of my life. Caleb's scream cut off as he passed out, and maybe that was a mercy. She worked fast, tied the splints tight, wrapped them with strips of canvas, checked his pulse, his breathing, the color of his skin, every movement precise, practiced. This wasn't the first broken bone she'd set, and I had the sudden terrible suspicion it wasn't even the 10th. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and let out a long breath. "He'll live," she said, "if we get him somewhere warm, if infection doesn't set in, if we get off this ledge before the wagon goes over." She looked at me. "Can you rig a travois?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Then do it. We have maybe 5 minutes." The next hour was a blur of desperate work. I cut the horses free, let them bolt down the trail, used rope and broken wagon parts to rig a stretcher we could drag. The woman helped me lift Caleb onto it, and the strength in her arms was staggering. She didn't grunt or strain, just lifted, like his weight was nothing. The first snowflakes started falling as we made it off the ledge. By the time we reached my cabin, the world had disappeared into white. I kicked open the door, and we hauled Caleb inside. The woman moved immediately to the fireplace, got a fire going with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of practice. I stood there dripping melted snow, watching her take over my space like she owned it. She didn't ask permission, didn't apologize, just moved through my cabin finding what she needed. Water from the barrel by the door, clean cloth from my supply chest. She boiled water and started cleaning Caleb's wound while I stood there like an idiot. "Are you going to help?" she said. "Or just watch?" I helped. We worked in silence, the only sounds the crackle of fire and Caleb's shallow breathing. The woman's hands moved with absolute certainty. She packed the wound, rewrapped the splint, checked his temperature by pressing her hand to his forehead. When she was satisfied, she straightened up and looked at me properly for the first time. "My name is Ada Palmer," she said. "Not Adeline Chen. Adeline died of typhoid 2 weeks before the wagon was supposed to leave. The agency needed to fill the contract. I needed to disappear. We made a deal." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Outside, the wind howled, the cabin walls groaned, snow piled against the windows, and I knew with absolute certainty that we were trapped. The November storms in the Tetons don't last hours. They last days, sometimes weeks. I looked at this woman who wasn't the woman I'd sent for. This stranger who'd saved Caleb's life, who'd invaded my space, who stood in my cabin like she had every right to be here. I should have been angry, should have felt deceived. Instead, all I felt was a strange sense of recognition, like looking in a mirror and seeing someone else's face staring back, but understanding the eyes perfectly. "Why did you need to disappear?" I asked. Her face went hard. "Careful, because in Sacramento there's a warrant out for my arrest. Assault. A white man tried to rape my mother. I broke his jaw with a shovel. He lived. Barely. But I'm Chinese and he's white, and his word counts more than mine ever will. So when the agency offered me a way out, I took it." She crossed her arms. "If you want to send me back, I understand. But you should know that going back means going to jail. Or worse. So wherever you send me, make sure it's somewhere the law doesn't reach, because I'd rather die on this mountain than let them put me in chains." The fire crackled. Caleb moaned in his sleep. I thought about the 8 women who'd come before her. The ones who'd taken one look at my life and decided anything else was better. The ones who'd left notes saying they'd rather die alone than freeze here with me. This woman wasn't running to something. She was running from something, just like I was. "Caleb needs care for at least 2 weeks, I heard myself say. Bone won't set faster than that. Traveling in winter with a half-healed leg is suicide. So here's the deal. You stay. Help me keep him alive. When spring comes, we figure out what's next." Her eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that?" "Because I've made 8 women miserable trying to force them into a life they didn't choose. Maybe it's time I stopped choosing for other people." She studied me for a long moment. I could see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to decide if I was telling the truth or setting some kind of trap. Then she extended her hand. "Deal," she said. I took her hand. Her grip was strong enough to crush stone. Her palm was calloused and warm. She held my hand just long enough to seal the agreement, then let go and turned back to check on Caleb. And that was it. No tears, no gratitude, no relief. Just a woman accepting the terms of survival and getting back to work. I stood there watching her move through my space, this stranger who wasn't supposed to be here, and felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Not hope. Hope was too fragile, too likely to shatter. But possibility, the faint ghost of a chance that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Outside the storm raged. Inside, the fire burned warm. And between us, an agreement hung like a bridge across a chasm neither of us had chosen to cross. But we were crossing it anyway. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days trapped in a cabin that suddenly felt half the size it used to. 3 days of rationing firewood and melting snow for water, and watching Caleb drift in and out of fevered sleep. 3 days of Ada moving through my space like she'd lived here all her life, efficient and silent and utterly unconcerned with the fact that we were strangers sharing 20 feet of floor space. I'd thought I knew what loneliness was. 6 years alone on this mountain had taught me every shape it could take. The silence that pressed on your ears until you started talking to yourself just to hear a human voice. The way your own thoughts became the only company you had, circling and circling until they wore grooves in your mind. The hollow ache of going weeks without touching another living soul. But this was different. This was the loneliness of being close enough to another person to hear them breathe at night, but having an ocean of unspoken words between you. The loneliness of working side by side in perfect coordination, anticipating each other's movements, and never once connecting beyond the purely practical. Ada slept in the loft. I took the floor by the fire. Caleb had the bed. We moved around each other like planets in orbit, held in place by gravity but never touching. On the second day, Caleb's fever spiked. I woke to Ada climbing down from the loft in the pre-dawn darkness. She moved to Caleb's side and pressed her hand to his forehead. Even in the dim firelight, I could see her face tighten. "Infection," she said quietly. Dread settled in my chest. I'd seen infection before, seen what it did to men when it got into the blood, watched my uncle die of it after a minor cut on his hand turned septic. There were no doctors within 50 miles, no medicine except what you could make from mountain herbs. Once infection set in deep, all you could do was pray. And I'd stopped believing in prayer a long time ago. "I need hot water," Ada said. "All of it. And I need you to hold him down again." I built up the fire while she rummaged through her trunk. She pulled out a cloth bundle and unwrapped it carefully. Inside were dried herbs I didn't recognize. She crushed them between her palms, the sharp, bitter smell filling the cabin. "What is that?" I asked. "Skullcap, yarrow, echinacea root." My mother was a midwife before she came to America, learned medicine from her grandmother in Guangdong. She made me memorize every plant, every remedy, every way to fight infection without a doctor. Ada mixed the crushed herbs with hot water, creating a paste that looked like mud and smelled worse. She peeled back Caleb's bandages. The wound had turned angry red, streaks of inflammation spreading up his leg toward his hip. If those streaks reached his heart, he was dead. "I need you to trust me," Ada said. "This is going to look bad, but it's the only chance he has." She took the knife from her boot, heated the blade in the fire until it glowed. Then she looked at me. "Hold him. Don't let go no matter what." I pinned Caleb's shoulders to the bed. Ada positioned herself at his leg. For just a second, I saw her hands shake. The first time I'd seen any crack in that iron composure. Then she steadied herself and cut. Caleb's scream could have shattered mountains. He thrashed with the strength of delirium, and it took everything I had to keep him down. Ada worked with terrifying focus, cutting away infected tissue, draining the wound, packing it with her herbal paste. Blood ran dark and thick. The smell was horrific, but her hands never wavered. When it was done, she bandaged him again and sat back, her hands covered in blood up to the elbows. "Now we wait," she said. We waited. I cleaned her knife while she washed her hands. Neither of us spoke. The cabin filled with the sound of Caleb's labored breathing and the wind battering the walls outside. After a while, Ada stood and moved to the stove. She pulled out supplies I hadn't even known I had and started cooking. The smell of frying onions and rice filled the air, cutting through the metallic scent of blood. "You need to eat," she said. "Can't take care of him if you collapse." I wasn't hungry. The sight of that infection had killed my appetite. But I sat at the table because refusing felt like it would insult the effort she was making. She set a bowl in front of me. Some kind of rice porridge with bits of dried venison stirred through it. Simple, basic. But when I tasted it, flavors exploded on my tongue that I'd forgotten existed. Ginger, garlic, something else I couldn't name that made everything taste alive. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" I asked. "My parents ran a boarding house in Sacramento's Chinatown. 10 rooms, always full. I was cooking for a dozen people before I was 12. You learn fast when people are depending on you not to poison them." She sat across from me with her own bowl. We ate in silence. Outside, the storm howled. After a while, I heard myself ask the question I'd been avoiding. "Why did you really take Adeline's place?" Ada's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. She set them down carefully. "I told you, the warrant. That's not all of it." She looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time since she'd arrived, I saw past the armor. Saw something raw underneath, something that looked like the loneliness I'd been carrying for 6 years. "Because I was tired," she said quietly. "Tired of working myself to death in other people's kitchens, other people's laundries, other people's lives. Being invisible unless someone needed something. Being told I was too big, too foreign, too much. Being grabbed by men who thought Chinese women were easy targets. Being spit on by children whose parents taught them I wasn't human." Her voice didn't break, but it came close. The agency showed me your ad. It didn't say anything about what I should look like, didn't ask for a photograph, just asked if I could work, if I could survive, if I was willing to stay. And I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is the one place in the world where what I can do matters more than what I look like. She picked up her chopsticks again. So I lied about my name, took a dead woman's ticket, ran toward a mountain in the middle of nowhere because it seemed safer than staying in a city full of people who hated me. The truth sat between us like a third presence in the room. I wanted to tell her I understood, wanted to say that I'd run to this mountain for the same reason, fleeing a past that hurt too much to carry. But the words stuck in my throat the way they always did. Instead, I said, "Your mother's medicines, they working? We'll know by morning, and if they don't, then Caleb dies, and we bury him when the ground thaws enough to dig, same as you'd do for anyone else who doesn't make it through winter on this mountain." The bluntness should have shocked me. Instead, it felt like relief. 8 women had come to this mountain and tried to pretend it wasn't dangerous, tried to cover fear with false optimism, tried to make this life something it wasn't. Ada saw it clearly, named it honestly, didn't flinch from the truth. That night, I lay on the floor by the fire and listened to her breathing in the loft above me. Steady, calm. The breathing of someone who'd learned to sleep through anything because safety was a luxury she'd never been able to afford. I thought about Sarah, about the way she'd breathed in those final hours, ragged and desperate, about holding her hand and feeling the life drain out of her while I was powerless to stop it. I thought about the promise I'd made at her grave. Never again. Never put another woman at risk. Never let my selfishness kill someone I cared about. But Ada wasn't Sarah. Ada hadn't asked me to save her, hadn't asked me to protect her. She'd saved Caleb's life, claimed space in my cabin, and met this mountain on its own terms without apology. And I was terrified of what that meant. Morning came gray and cold. I woke to find Ada already up, checking Caleb's bandages. She looked up when she heard me move. "Fever broke," she said. "The infection's retreating." Relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. Caleb was going to live. We weren't going to spend the rest of winter with a corpse frozen in the corner waiting for spring burial. Ada went back to changing his bandages, her movements efficient and gentle. Caleb was conscious now, weak but aware. He managed to smile when he saw me. "This one's a keeper, Jonas," he rasped. "Got hands like an angel and the spine of a grizzly bear." Ada snorted. "Flattery won't make this hurt less. Hold still." She finished bandaging him and stood. Looked at me. "He needs to stay off that leg for at least another week. After that we can try getting him down the mountain on a sled if the weather holds. But the bone needs time to knit." I nodded. A week. We could manage a week. The storm broke that afternoon. The clouds parted and sunlight poured through the windows like a gift. Snow blanketed everything 3 feet deep, turning the world into a foreign landscape of white and shadow. Ada stood at the window, looking out at the mountains with an expression I couldn't read. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "It'll kill you if you're not careful." She glanced back at me. "Everything beautiful will kill you if you're not careful. That doesn't make it less worth looking at." We spent the rest of that day digging out. The cabin door was buried. The path to the woodshed was gone. Everything had to be cleared by hand, and the work was brutal in the high-altitude cold. But Ada worked beside me without complaint. She lifted logs that would have made most men stagger. She shoveled snow with the same relentless efficiency she brought to everything else. And when we finally cleared a path to the chicken coop and found the birds somehow alive, she laughed. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh. The sound was rich and deep, rising up from her belly like music. It changed her whole face, softening the hard edges, making her look younger, making her look like someone who remembered what joy felt like. "Stubborn things," she said, reaching in to collect eggs. "Too mean to die." "Like you," I said. She looked at me, surprised, then smiled. "Like both of us," she corrected. That evening we sat by the fire while Caleb slept. Ada pulled out a book from her trunk, old and worn with Chinese characters on the cover. "What is that?" I asked. "Poetry. Tang Dynasty. My father loved it. Used to read it aloud every night. She opened to a page at random and started reading in Chinese. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the rhythm, the rise and fall of her voice, the way she caressed each syllable like something precious. When she finished, she looked at me. It's about a mountain hermit who plants bamboo in the snow. Everyone tells him it's foolish. Bamboo can't survive the cold. But he plants it anyway. And when spring comes, it grows. She closed the book. My father said it was about faith. I think it's about stubbornness. Sometimes you survive just because you refuse to die. I thought about that. About the 6 years I'd spent on this mountain, refusing to die even when part of me wanted to. About Ada climbing into a wagon to nowhere because anything was better than the life she was leaving. Maybe that's the same thing, I said. Faith and stubbornness. Maybe. We sat in comfortable silence. The fire crackled. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. And then Ada spoke again. I need to tell you something else. About why I'm really here. I waited. Adeline Chen didn't just die of typhoid. She killed herself. The words hit like a physical blow. The agency didn't want anyone to know. Bad for business if mail-order brides start dying before they even leave San Francisco. So they covered it up, said it was disease, paid the doctor to sign the death certificate. How do you know? Because I was the one who found her body. I worked in the same boarding house, came to her room to borrow thread and found her hanging from the ceiling beam. Ada's voice stayed steady, but her hands clenched in her lap. There was a letter. She left it on the bed. It said she couldn't do it. Couldn't climb onto another wagon and travel to another strange place to marry another strange man who'd probably treat her like property. She'd done it twice before, she said, 2 failed marriages to men who wanted a servant, not a wife. She said she'd rather die than try a 3rd time. Outside, something creaked in the cold. The cabin settled. I read that letter, Ada continued, and I thought, that could be me, in a year, in 5 years, running until there's nowhere left to run. So when the agency offered me her ticket, I almost said no. Almost decided dying in Sacramento was better than dying on some mountain in the middle of nowhere. She looked at me. But then I thought about that poem, about the hermit planting bamboo in the snow, and I decided to be stubborn one more time, to refuse to die, to take the stupid ticket and climb onto the stupid wagon and see what happened. What happened is you saved a man's life, I said quietly. What happened is you're still here, for now. The weight of those 2 words settled over us. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to worry, that I'd never treat her like property, that this could be different from whatever she'd run from. But I'd made promises before, to Sarah, to myself, to the 8 women who'd come before Ada and found my promises hollow. So instead, I stood and retrieved something from under the floorboard where I kept my few precious things. A wooden box, old, carved with initials I'd added myself. I handed it to Ada. She opened it carefully. Inside were 8 letters. Rejection letters from 8 women who'd arrived on this mountain and left within days, each one a variation of the same theme. This isn't what I expected. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't the life I want. At the bottom of the box was a photograph. A young woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile standing beside a younger version of me. That's Sarah, I said. My first wife. She died here. Childbirth. 10 years ago. Ada looked at the photo, then at me. I've been running from that for a decade, I continued. Sent for those other women because I thought maybe if I tried enough times I could replace her. Replace what I lost. But you can't replace people. You can just keep disappointing the new ones when they don't fill the hole the old ones left. I took the box back, put it away. I'm telling you this so you know what you're dealing with. I'm broken, Ada. This mountain is harsh, and I've got no business asking anyone to share either one. Ada stood, walked to the window, looked out at the moonlit snow. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. I'm broken too, Jonas. We all are. The question isn't whether we're broken. It's whether we're broken in ways that fit together or ways that cut each other to pieces. She turned to face me. So here's my counteroffer. We stop pretending either of us is here for romance. We both know this is survival. You need help on this mountain. I need a place the law can't reach. That's the deal. Nothing more." She held out her hand. "Partners. Not husband and wife. Not lovers. Just two broken people trying to make it through winter without killing each other. Agreed?" I looked at her hand, looked at her face, saw the same wariness I felt reflected back at me. This was nothing like what I'd imagined when I sent those ads. No romance, no gentle courtship, no hope of replacing what I'd lost. Just honesty. Just the raw truth of two people too damaged to pretend otherwise. I took her hand. Agreed. We shook. Her grip was strong and warm. When she let go, something had shifted between us. Not love, not even affection, but trust. The beginning of it, fragile as new ice over a river. She went back to the loft. I lay down by the fire. Caleb snored softly in the bed. And for the first time in 6 years, I fell asleep without the weight of expectation crushing my chest, without the fear that tomorrow someone would wake up and realize I wasn't worth staying for, because Ada had already decided. And her decision wasn't about me at all. It was about her. About choosing survival on her own terms. About planting bamboo in the snow and refusing to let the cold kill it. Outside, the mountain loomed in the darkness. Patient, eternal, waiting to see if we'd survive it. But tonight, we were warm. We were fed. We were alive. And sometimes, that's all the victory you get. 3 weeks after the storm, Caleb's leg had healed enough for him to sit up without screaming. Ada changed his bandages every morning with the same efficient gentleness she brought to everything, and I watched the way her hands moved, certain and careful, never causing more pain than absolutely necessary. We'd fallen into a rhythm, not comfortable exactly, but functional. Ada cooked meals that made my 6 years of bachelor stew taste like punishment. I kept the firewood stocked and the traps running. We worked around each other in the small cabin space like two gears that had learned to mesh without grinding. But underneath the routine, tension was building. The letter sat on the table between us like an unexploded bomb. It had arrived with the first mail rider to make it up the mountain since the storm. Official territorial seal, heavy paper, the kind of correspondence that never brought good news. I'd opened it with hands that wanted to shake. Read it twice to make sure I understood what I was seeing. Then set it down and walked outside to breathe cold air until my heart stopped trying to punch through my ribs. When I came back in, Ada was reading it. I hadn't given her permission, but she didn't seem to think she needed it. She read slowly, her lips moving slightly over the legal language. "What does this mean?" she asked when she finished. "It means I'm about to lose everything." I sat down heavily at the table. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer, like they were already preparing to belong to someone else. "My Uncle August owned this land," I said. "When he died 5 years ago, he left it to me in a handwritten will. No lawyer, no official documents. Just a letter saying the mountain was mine if I wanted it. And you wanted it. I needed it. After Sarah died, I couldn't breathe in places where people could see me. Couldn't stand the way they looked at me with pity. Couldn't stand myself. This mountain was the only place I could exist without wanting to stop existing." I gestured at the letter. "But August had a niece, Vera Hollis. She's contesting the will. Says family land should go to blood family. And the territorial court agrees with her. Says a handwritten will isn't enough. Says I need to prove continuous habitation as a family unit for 5 years or the land reverts to her." Ada's eyes tracked over the letter again. Family unit. Exactly. Which means a single man living alone doesn't count. I need a spouse. Need proof I'm building a community, not just occupying space. The law was written to prevent squatters from claiming land they're not actually using. And you've been sending for mail-order brides because you thought you wanted a wife," Ada said slowly. "But you actually needed one." The truth of it sat between us. 6 months, I said. "That's what the letter says. I have 6 months to present evidence of a family unit or I get evicted. What happens then? Then Vera gets the land and I go back to nothing. This mountain is all I have, Ada. The only place I've ever felt like I could breathe. Without it, I'm just a man who killed his wife and spent a decade running from the memory." The fire crackled. Caleb shifted in his sleep. Outside, a raven called, harsh and lonely. Ada set the letter down carefully. "I'll do it," she said. "What?" "I'll marry you. For real. Legal. We'll make it look like a family unit. Save your land." "Ada, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the mountains. Her back was straight, shoulders squared, but I could see tension in the line of her spine. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said. "You need a wife to keep your home. I need a home to stay hidden from the law. It's practical." The word hung in the air. Practical. Like we were discussing a business arrangement, a trade agreement between two merchants. Maybe that's all it was. "But there's a condition," I said. She turned to look at me. "If you ever want to leave, you tell me. No running in the night, no notes pinned to the door. We end it honest." Something flickered across her face, an emotion I couldn't name. She crossed the room and extended her hand. "Deal," she said. I took her hand. Her palm was warm and calloused against mine. We shook once, firmly, sealing an agreement that would tie our lives together for reasons that had nothing to do with love. When she let go, I felt the weight of what we'd just agreed to settle over me like snow. This wasn't what I'd imagined when I sent those ads. This was colder, more honest, more terrifying because there was no pretense to hide behind. Just two people making a bargain to survive. Caleb recovered enough to ride within the week. I rigged a sled to drag him down the mountain, and Ada insisted on coming along even though the journey would be brutal. "We need to file the marriage certificate as soon as possible," she said. "Every day we wait is a day closer to losing the land." She was right. She was always right about the practical things. The trip down took 4 hours. Caleb gritted his teeth through every jarring bump, and I felt each of his suppressed groans like a knife. But Ada walked beside the sled the entire way, one hand resting on the frame, occasionally leaning down to check on him. When we finally reached Redemption Falls, half the town came out to stare. I'd lived on the mountain for 6 years, made this trip twice a month for supplies, and every single time, people looked at me with the same mixture of pity and curiosity. The hermit who couldn't keep a wife, the man who'd let 8 women run from his mountain. But now they were staring at Ada, at her height, her build, the way she moved with confidence that demanded space, at her Chinese features in a town that had maybe seen 3 Asian faces in its entire existence. I felt her stiffen beside me, felt the way she drew into herself without actually moving, making herself smaller in all the invisible ways. My hand found her elbow, just rested there, a small point of contact. Her eyes flicked to me, surprised. Then something in her shoulders relaxed. We delivered Caleb to the doctor, a half-drunk man named Morrison who reeked of whiskey and incompetence. He examined Caleb's leg with hands that shook. "Whoever set this knew what they were doing," he said grudgingly. "Clean splint, good care." He looked at Ada with bloodshot eyes. "You do this?" "I did." "Where'd you learn medicine?" "My mother." He grunted. "Better work than I could have done. Bones knitting clean. He'll walk again. Might have a limp, but he'll walk." Relief washed through me. Caleb would be all right. We left him in Morrison's dubious care and headed to the general store. It was run by a woman named Miriam Fletcher, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, who'd been the unofficial information broker of Redemption Falls for 30 years. "Well now," she said when we walked in. Her eyes traveled over Ada with undisguised assessment. "If it isn't Jonas Hale with number 9, this one looks sturdier than the others. Might actually last a winter." "Her name is Ada," I said, voice harder than I'd intended. "And yes, she'll last. We're here to buy supplies and file a marriage certificate." "Marriage certificate?" Miriam's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. "You two getting married?" "We are." "When?" "Today. As soon as we can find Reverend Pike." Miriam let out a low whistle. "That's quick work, even for you." She looked at Ada. "You sure about this, honey? This mountain eats women alive. I've seen 8 of them come through here looking hopeful and leave looking haunted." "I'm sure," Ada said. Her voice was level and cold. Now do you have what we need, or should we try the next town? Miriam blinked, then smiled, slow and approving. I like this one, she said to me. Got spine. She started pulling supplies from shelves. Reverend Pike's at the church. Goes through the marriage ceremony about once a week for desperate people. He'll do yours for $5. We gathered what we needed. Flour, salt, coffee, dried beans, the basics that would see us through the rest of winter. Miriam tallied everything up, her eyes never leaving Ada. You're Chinese, she said. It wasn't a question. I am. There's laws against that, you know. Chinese can't marry white folks in some territories. This isn't one of them, Ada said. I checked. Smart and thorough. Miriam nodded approvingly. You're going to need that on his mountain. She leaned across the counter. Fair warning, though. There's a woman in town asking questions about Jonas. Showed up 2 days ago. Says she's his uncle's niece. Got a lawyer with her and everything. Cold fear washed through me. Vera. She's been talking to everyone, Miriam continued, asking about Jonas's marriages, about how many women came and went, about whether anyone believes he's actually trying to build a family or just trying to hold on to land that isn't rightfully his. What have people been saying? I asked. Miriam shrugged. Truth, mostly. That 8 women ran from you. That you're a hermit who can barely stand human company. That this latest one, she nodded at Ada, showed up right when you needed a wife for the court. Looks suspicious. It's not, I started. I know that, Miriam interrupted, but Vera doesn't care about truth. She cares about winning, and she's got a good lawyer and a better case. You two better make this marriage look real or you're going to lose everything. We left the store with our supplies and the weight of Miriam's warning. Found Reverend Pike at the small church on the edge of town. He was older than I remembered, his beard more gray than brown, his eyes tired from too many years riding circuit through hostile territory. You're here for a wedding, he said when we explained. It wasn't a question. He'd married me to Sarah 10 years ago, buried her and our son 6 months later. He knew my history. We are, I said. He looked at Ada. At me. At the space between us that felt miles wide despite standing close enough to touch. You sure about this? He asked. We're sure. Because I married Jonas once before. Watched that end in tragedy. I won't perform another ceremony if this is just about keeping land. It's not, Ada said. Her voice was steady and sure. We both have reasons for this marriage. Legal reasons, practical reasons. But we're not lying to each other about what this is. That's more honest than most marriages start with. Pike studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Honesty is a foundation, he said. Not a strong one, but a foundation nonetheless. Do you have witnesses? Caleb can't walk yet, I said. Then I'll find someone. He disappeared into the church and returned with 2 people. An old woman I didn't recognize and a young man who worked at the livery. This will be quick, Pike said. No ceremony, no promises you can't keep, just the legal words that make it binding. That acceptable? It's acceptable, Ada and I said together. We stood on the church steps. No flowers, no music, no guests beyond the 2 strangers who'd been pulled in as legal witnesses. The wind cut cold and sharp, carrying the smell of coming snow. Pike opened his worn prayer book. Do you, Jonas Hale, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Ada Palmer, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Then, by the authority vested in me by the Wyoming Territory, I pronounce you married. May God have mercy on you both. He closed the book with a snap that sounded like a door shutting. That's it? Ada asked. That's it. Pike pulled out a marriage certificate. Sign here. Both of you. We signed. The witnesses signed. Pike signed last and handed me the certificate. File this with the territorial office before the month is out, he said. And Jonas? Yes. I hope this one works out better than the last. For both your sakes. We left the church as husband and wife. The certificate was tucked in my coat pocket, proof of a marriage that existed on paper and in law but nowhere else. As we loaded the supplies onto the sled, a woman's voice called out behind us. Jonas Hale? I turned. The woman walking toward us was thin and severe, her dark hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. She wore widow's black and moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that every step mattered. Behind her, 2 children clung to her skirts. A girl, maybe 12, and a boy around 8, both with the same wary eyes as their mother. "I'm Vera Hollis," she said. "August Hale's niece. I believe you received my letter." My hand instinctively moved toward Ada. Found her arm, held on. "I received it," I said. Vera's eyes tracked the movement, noted how close we stood. The way Ada's posture had shifted, protective and alert. "And this must be the convenient wife I've been hearing about." "Ada Hale," Ada said. "His wife. How fortunate that you appeared just when Jonas needed someone to legitimize his claim on my family's land." "It's not your land," I said. "August left it to me. A handwritten note isn't a will." Vera's voice was sharp with barely controlled anger. "August promised me that land. Told me when my husband died I'd have a place to raise my children. Then he dies and I find out he gave it to a nephew he barely spoke to. I came when he asked. I stayed when he needed someone. That counts for something." "Does it?" Vera stepped closer. "Because from what I hear you've been living alone on that mountain for 5 years. No family, no community, just a hermit who keeps ordering wives from catalogs and watching them run away." "Things are different now," Ada said. "Are they?" Vera's eyes were cold. "Or did you just happen to arrive at the perfect moment to help him game the system? How much is he paying you to pretend this marriage is real?" "He's not paying me anything," Ada said. Her voice had dropped to something dangerous. "We're married, legal and binding, and what we build on that mountain is our business, not yours. We'll see what the court says about that." Vera turned to leave, then paused. "I'll be watching, Mr. Hale. Closely. And if this marriage is a sham, I'll prove it. Then you'll lose everything." She walked away, her children trailing behind her like shadows. Ada and I stood in the snow, watching them go. "That's who we're fighting," I said quietly. Ada's jaw was set. "Then we better make this convincing." The first month of our marriage was a lie we both committed to with frightening dedication. We moved through the motions of being husband and wife. Ada moved her few belongings from the loft down to the bedroom we now shared. Not because we wanted to, but because Vera had made it clear she'd be watching for any sign this marriage wasn't real. The bed was narrow. We lay on opposite edges, a canyon of space between us, neither willing to cross it. The first few nights I barely slept, too aware of her breathing, too conscious of the warmth radiating from her body, too terrified of what it meant to have someone this close again. But Ada slept soundly, or pretended to. Either way, she didn't seem bothered by the arrangement. During the day, we worked. The winter had settled in hard and deep. Snow piled higher every week. The traps needed constant checking. The animals needed feeding. The firewood needed chopping, and the chimney needed cleaning, and 1,000 other small tasks demanded attention. Ada attacked each one with the same relentless efficiency. She could split wood for hours without tiring, could skin a rabbit faster than I could cook meals that stretched our dwindling supplies further than I'd thought possible. We developed a language of small gestures. I'd reach for the axe and find she'd already sharpened it. She'd start to lift a heavy pot, and I'd be there to help without being asked. We moved around each other like dancers who'd been practicing for years instead of weeks, but we barely talked. Every 2 weeks, one of us made the trip down to Redemption Falls for supplies. Small purchases, visible purchases, things that made it clear we were building a life together. And every time people watched. Miriam Fletcher watched with shrewd, knowing eyes. Reverend Pike watched with worry creasing his face. The other townspeople watched with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. And Vera watched with the focused intensity of a predator waiting for prey to make a mistake. She'd rented a room above the saloon, set up residence in town like she was planning to stay for the duration. Every time I saw her, she was talking to someone, gathering information, building her case. It was on one of these supply runs, 6 weeks into our marriage, that everything changed. I'd come to town alone. Ada had stayed back to watch the traps, and I was loading flour onto the sled when Miriam stepped out of her store. "Jonas," she said quietly, "we need to talk." I followed her inside. She closed the door and drew the curtains. Vera's been asking questions, Miriam said. Specific questions. About whether you and Ada share a bed. About whether anyone's seen you act like a real married couple. About whether this whole thing is just a legal arrangement to keep the land. We are a real married couple, I said. On paper, sure. But Jonas, honey, you need to understand something. Territorial law says an unconsummated marriage isn't valid. If Vera can prove you two aren't actually living as husband and wife in all the ways that matter, your marriage certificate isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Reality lurched sideways beneath my feet. How would she prove that? Witnesses. Testimony. Miriam's face was grim. She's already got 3 people willing to testify that they've never seen you and Ada touch each other. Never seen you look at each other the way married people do. Never seen any sign of affection beyond 2 people sharing workspace. My hands clenched. What do you want me to do? I want you to make it real, or at least make it look real enough that Vera can't use it against you. Because right now, you're handing her the case on a silver platter. I rode back up the mountain with those words echoing in my head. The sun was setting by the time I reached the cabin, painting the snow in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if I could have seen past the dread. Ada was at the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. She looked up when I came in, and her face immediately shifted to concern. What happened? I told her. All of it. Vera's investigation, the consummation clause, the witnesses willing to testify against us. When I finished, Ada set down her spoon very carefully. So we need to make this convincing, she said. Ada, I can't ask you to do this. You're not asking. I'm offering. She turned to face me fully. Jonas, I've spent my whole life being touched by people who thought they owned me. Grabbed on the street, cornered in alleys. My body was something people took without asking permission. She stepped closer. You're the first man who's ever treated me like I have the right to say no. So I'm saying yes. Not because I have to, because I choose to. Because if we're going to do this, we do it on our terms. The fire crackled behind her. Snow began to fall outside, soft and silent. But first, she said, I need to tell you something about why this scares me. She moved to sit at the table. I sat across from her, waiting. In Sacramento, there was a man. Ada's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. He ran a restaurant where I worked, said he'd help me get citizenship papers she paused, if I was nice to him. I was 18. Stupid. Desperate. So I said yes. My chest tightened. He used me for 3 months. Then he got what he wanted and threw me out. Told everyone I'd tried to seduce him, that I was a Chinese whore trying to trap him into marriage. And because I was Chinese and he was white, everyone believed him. She looked up at me. After that, I promised myself I'd never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. Never let anyone touch me unless it was my choice, my decision, my terms. I understand, I said quietly. Do you? Because I need you to really understand, Jonas. If we do this, if we make this marriage real in all the ways it needs to be real, I need to know you won't use it against me, won't expect more than I can give, won't make me feel like I owe you something I can't afford to pay. I won't, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Then I have something to tell you too. I took a breath. Let it out. Sarah didn't just die in childbirth. She died because of me. Because I convinced her to come to this mountain even though I knew how dangerous it was. Because I got her pregnant even though we had no doctor within 50 miles. Because when things went wrong, I couldn't save her. The words I'd been holding for 10 years poured out. The baby was breech. I tried to turn it, tried everything I knew. But I didn't know enough. Sarah labored for 2 days, bleeding, screaming, begging me to make it stop, and all I could do was hold her hand and watch her die. My voice cracked. I buried them under the pine tree on the north ridge. Our son never even got a name, and I swore I'd never put another woman through that, never risk another life for my selfish need to not be alone. I looked at Ada. But then you came, and you're so capable I almost forgot to be afraid, until Miriam told me about the consummation clause. Now all I can think about is what happens if history repeats. If I get you pregnant and lose you the same way?" Silence filled the cabin. The fire popped. Wind rattled the windows. Then Ada spoke. "Jonas, look at me." I did. I am not Sarah. I am 6 feet tall and strong enough to break most men in half. I've delivered 17 babies, including 2 breech births, where the mothers should have died but didn't. I know my body. I know its limits. And I know how to survive. She reached across the table and took my hands. "You're not going to lose me. Not to childbirth. Not to this mountain. Not to anything. Because I refuse to die here. I refuse to let fear win." Her grip was iron strong and warm. "So if we're going to do this, we do it knowing the risks, knowing the history. And we do it anyway. Because sometimes the only way to survive is to stop letting the past control the future." We sat there holding hands across the table. 2 broken people making a choice that terrified us both. That night, we made our marriage real. It was awkward, tender, strange. Neither of us knew how to navigate the space between necessity and intimacy, but Ada was patient, and I was careful, and somehow we found our way through. Afterward, lying in the narrow bed with her solid warmth against my side, I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Not happiness, not yet. But the absence of the crushing weight that had been sitting on my chest since Sarah died. The possibility that maybe I could have this, could be close to someone, could build something that wouldn't immediately crumble to ash. Ada's breathing evened into sleep. I lay awake, listening to it, feeling her chest rise and fall, feeling alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The weeks that followed were different. We still worked, still maintained our routines. But something had shifted. Small touches became normal. Ada's hand on my shoulder as she passed, my fingers brushing her back as we worked side by side, the casual intimacy of people who'd learned they could trust each other with their bodies. We talked more, too. Not about anything important, just the small observations that fill the spaces between work. Ada told me about growing up in Sacramento, about learning to fight because Chinese girls who couldn't protect themselves didn't survive long, about her father's love of poetry and her mother's skill with medicine. I told her about my childhood in Montana, about my mother dying of pneumonia when I was 12, about my father bringing home a new woman who left within a year, and how he drank himself to death rather than face another abandonment. "We're quite a pair," Ada said one evening, "both running from parents who couldn't survive loss." "Maybe that's why we recognize each other," I said. She smiled. It was becoming easier to make her smile. But beneath the growing comfort, worry gnawed at me. Because Vera was still watching, still building her case, and our marriage, real as it was becoming, still had to pass the scrutiny of a territorial court that didn't care about what we felt, only about what we could prove. The answer came from an unexpected source. It was late March, nearly 3 months into our marriage, when Ada came to me with news that made my blood run cold. "I'm pregnant." 10 years collapsed into this moment. All I could see was Sarah, the same storm, the same fear, the same helplessness threatening to drown me. "No," I heard myself say. "No, you can't be. We need to get you down to a city, somewhere with a real doctor. You can't stay here." Ada grabbed my face with both hands, forced me to look at her. "Listen to me. I am not leaving. This baby is not dying. We are going to survive this because I refuse to let fear win. Do you hear me? I refuse." "You don't understand," I said, voice breaking. I watched Sarah die. I held our son and felt him go cold. "I can't do that again. I can't watch you die. Then don't watch me die. Watch me live." Her eyes blazed with fierce determination. "Watch me prove that women's bodies are stronger than you've been taught to believe. Watch me give birth to this baby and survive it, and raise them on this mountain because that's what I choose to do. What if something goes wrong? Then we deal with it when it happens. But we don't run from possibilities, Jonas. We prepare for them." She let go of my face and stepped back. "Now you have a choice. You can believe in me. Believe that I know my body and my limits. Or you can let your past destroy our future. But you need to choose now. because I'm not leaving this mountain and this baby is coming whether you're ready or not." I looked at this woman who'd climbed into my life by accident and claimed space in it through sheer force of will. This woman who refused to bend, who met every challenge with stubborn determination, who'd already survived more than most people faced in a lifetime. And I made my choice. "I believe in you," I said. "I'm terrified, but I believe in you." "Good," she said, "because we're going to need that for what comes next." What comes next? The court hearing. Vera filed her challenge. "We go before Judge Mercer in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Just enough time for Ada's pregnancy to start showing, just enough time for Vera to use it as evidence that our marriage was real, or just enough time for everything to fall apart." The territorial courthouse in Redemption Falls was nothing more than a converted saloon with a judge's bench where the bar used to stand. But on the morning of our hearing, it felt as imposing as any cathedral. The wooden walls seemed to lean in, watching, judging, waiting to see if two broken people could prove they'd built something worth keeping. Ada was 4 months pregnant now, not obviously so under her wool coat, but visible enough if you knew to look. She'd been sick every morning for weeks, though she never complained. Just gritted her teeth through it and kept working. Kept moving forward with the same relentless determination she brought to everything. We sat in the front row, our hands clasped between us. Her palm was damp with nervous sweat. Mine probably was too. Across the aisle, Vera Hollis sat with her lawyer, a thin man named Patterson who had the predatory look of someone who enjoyed destroying people for profit. Vera's children sat behind her, quiet and still. The girl, Lucy, watched us with wary eyes. The boy, Thomas, seemed more interested in the cobwebs on the ceiling. Judge Cornelius Mercer entered through a side door. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 60, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of face that had seen too much human desperation to be surprised by any of it. He settled into his chair with a sigh that suggested this was just one more tedious case in a long line of tedious cases. But when he spoke, his voice carried weight. "We're here to determine the validity of Jonas Hale's claim to property in Section 14 of the Teton Range. Miss Hollis, you're the challenger. Present your case." Patterson stood, smoothing his suit jacket. "Your Honor, this case is about a man attempting to circumvent property law through a fraudulent marriage. Jonas Hale has no legitimate claim to the land in question. The property belonged to August Hale, who died 5 years ago. According to territorial statute, property without a valid will reverts to the nearest blood relative. That is my client, Vera Hollis. August left a will," I said before I could stop myself. Judge Mercer looked at me over his glasses. "Mr. Hale, you'll have your turn to speak. Right now, I'm listening to Miss Hollis's lawyer." Patterson smiled thinly. "The so-called will is a handwritten note, Your Honor. No witnesses, no notary, no legal standing whatsoever. Even if we were to acknowledge it, Mr. Hale has failed to meet the requirements for maintaining the claim. Territorial law requires proof of continuous habitation as a family unit. Mr. Hale has lived alone on that mountain for 5 years, with no family until he conveniently acquired a wife mere weeks after receiving notice of this legal challenge." He pulled out a stack of papers. "I have testimony from multiple witnesses establishing that Mr. Hale has attempted to create the appearance of a family no fewer than 8 times. 8 mail-order brides brought to his property. 8 women who fled within days. A pattern of behavior suggesting Mr. Hale is either incapable of maintaining a genuine marriage or is deliberately gaming the system to hold on to land that doesn't belong to him." My chest tightened. Hearing it laid out like that, clinical and cold, made our story sound exactly like what Patterson was claiming. A fraud, a desperate man's attempt to keep something he had no right to. "The 9th bride," Patterson continued, "appeared at a remarkably convenient time. Just as the legal challenge was filed, she married Mr. Hale within weeks. No courtship, no engagement. Just a hasty ceremony that looks very much like a business transaction rather than a genuine marriage." "He's lying," Ada said. Her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Judge Mercer raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Hale, you'll have an opportunity to testify. For now, please remain silent." But Ada was already standing. He's making it sound like Jonas tricked me into this. Like I'm some kind of victim or pawn. That's not what happened. I chose to come here. I chose to marry him. And I chose to stay because this mountain and this man are worth fighting for. Mrs. Hale, Judge Mercer's voice carried warning. Your Honor, if I may, Patterson said smoothly, this outburst only demonstrates the defensive posture of someone who knows their position is indefensible. It demonstrates that I don't appreciate being characterized as either a fool or a liar, Ada shot back. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Mercer banged his gavel. Order. Mrs. Hale, sit down. Mr. Patterson, continue. Ada sat, but her hand found mine and squeezed so hard I felt bones grind. I squeezed back, trying to communicate everything I couldn't say out loud, that I was grateful, that I was terrified, that I was sorry for dragging her into this mess. Patterson called his first witness, Miriam Fletcher. Cold dread settled in my chest. Miriam had always been kind to us, but she was also honest to a fault. If Patterson asked the right questions, she'd have no choice but to tell the truth, and the truth wouldn't look good for us. Miriam took the stand, looking uncomfortable in her Sunday dress. Mrs. Fletcher, Patterson began, how long have you known Jonas Hale? 7 years, give or take, and in that time how many women has he brought to Redemption Falls claiming they were his bride? Miriam hesitated. 8. 8. And of those 8, how many stayed longer than a month? None of them. Can you describe Mr. Hale's demeanor with these women? Did he seem like a man building a genuine relationship or a man going through motions? Miriam's eyes flicked to me. I saw the apology in them. He seemed like a man who expected them to leave, like he was just waiting for it to happen. Pain lanced through my chest. And the current Mrs. Hale, Patterson pressed, when you first met her, did their relationship seem genuine? Miriam was quiet for a long moment. No, she said finally, it didn't. They moved around each other like strangers, barely looked at each other, definitely didn't act like newlyweds. Thank you, Mrs. Fletcher. No further questions. Judge Mercer looked at me. Mr. Hale, do you have any questions for this witness? I stood on shaking legs. Miriam watched me with sad eyes. Miriam, you said we didn't seem genuine at first. What about now? Patterson started to object, but Judge Mercer waved him silent. Answer the question, Mrs. Fletcher. Miriam straightened in her chair. Now? Now they look like two people who figured out how to be partners. I see the way Jonas helps her down from the wagon even though she doesn't need help. See the way she fixes his coat collar without thinking about it. See them move around each other in my store like they're dancing, like they know each other's rhythms. She looked directly at Vera. I've been married twice. First husband died. Second one left. I know what real marriage looks like versus what people pretend marriage looks like. And those two? They're real. Maybe they didn't start that way, but they are now. Thank you, I said quietly. Patterson called 2 more witnesses, a man from the livery who testified he'd never seen us show affection, a woman from the boarding house who said Ada barely spoke to anyone in town. Each testimony chipped away at our case like hammer blows on cracking ice. Then it was Vera's turn to testify. She took the stand with her back straight and her face composed, but I could see pain flickering beneath the surface. This wasn't just about property for her, this was about survival. Miss Hollis, Patterson said, can you tell the court about your relationship with August Hale? He was my uncle, my father's brother. When my father died, Uncle August was the only family I had left besides my children. And did he make any promises to you regarding the property? Vera's voice tightened. He promised me that when my husband died, I'd have a place to go, somewhere to raise my children. He said the mountain would always be home for family, but he left it to Jonas Hale instead. Yes, a nephew he barely knew, who never visited, who only showed up after Uncle August died to claim what wasn't his. She turned to look at me. I don't hate you, Mr. Hale, but my children need a home. I need a way to provide for them. That land was promised to me. It should be mine. The raw honesty in her voice hit harder than any of Patterson's legal arguments, because she was right. She did need that land. Her children did need a home. We both needed the same thing, and only one of us could have it. Judge Mercer called a recess for lunch. Ada and I sat on the courthouse steps, neither of us hungry. "We're losing," I said. "We're not done yet." "Ada, you heard them. Every witness makes us look like frauds." She turned to face me, her hand moving to rest on the small swell of her belly. "Then we tell the truth. All of it. We stop trying to make this look like something it's not, and we just tell them what it actually is." "Which is what?" "Two people who started with a bargain and built something real. Two people who chose each other even when they didn't have to." She took my hand. "We can't control what they believe, but we can control what we say. So let's say it honestly and hope that's enough." When court resumed, Judge Mercer looked at me. "Mr. Hale, present your defense." I stood. My prepared speech, the careful legal arguments I'd rehearsed, died in my throat. Instead, I just started talking. "Your Honor, everything Vera's lawyer said is true. I did bring 8 women to that mountain. I did watch them all leave. I did marry Ada right after getting the legal challenge notice. On paper, this looks exactly like what Patterson says it is. A fraud." I took a breath. "But the truth is more complicated. I came to that mountain 10 years ago because my wife died there. Childbirth. I couldn't save her. I've spent a decade punishing myself for that. Sent for those other women because I thought maybe if I tried enough times I could replace her, replace what I lost. But you can't replace people. You just keep disappointing the new ones when they don't fill the hole the old ones left." The courtroom went silent. Then Ada came. Not because she wanted to, because she had nowhere else to go. And I married her not because I loved her, but because I needed her to keep this land. It was a bargain, a business arrangement, nothing more. Ada stood beside me, her hand finding mine. But somewhere between surviving that first storm and learning to rely on each other with the truth, something changed. We stopped pretending this was romance and started building something real. Partnership, respect. The kind of marriage that's based on choosing each other every day, not just once at an altar. My voice cracked. "I can't promise you this marriage started pure. I can only tell you what it is now. Real, honest, worth defending. And if that's not enough for your law, then I'll lose this land. But I won't lie about what Ada and I have built together." I sat down. My heart hammered against my ribs. Judge Mercer looked at Ada. "Mrs. Hale, do you have anything to add?" Ada stood. She'd been nervous before, but now her voice was steady. "Your Honor, I'd like to read something, if that's permitted." The judge nodded. Ada reached into her coat and pulled out a worn leather journal. My chest tightened. I knew that journal. It had been August's. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "Found it hidden in the floorboards when I was cleaning." She looked at the judge. "This belonged to August Hale, Jonas's uncle. May I read an entry? Proceed." Ada opened to a marked page. Her voice filled the courtroom. "March 14th, 1879. Jonas arrived today. Looks like a ghost. Says he doesn't want to live anymore, but doesn't have the courage to die. I told him, stay. Build something. The mountain will either kill you or cure you. Either way, you'll have an answer." She turned the page. June 3rd, 1880. Jonas is still here. Built a barn that'll outlast both of us. Still doesn't smile. But he's alive. That's enough. Another page. November 12th, 1881. I'm dying. Doc says maybe 3 months. I'm writing my will tonight. Vera deserves security. But Jonas deserves this mountain. It's the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. If I give it to Vera, she'll sell within a year. If I give it to Jonas, he'll protect it like it's sacred. Because to him it is. Ada's voice strengthened. August didn't give Jonas this land because he was blood family. He gave it to him because Jonas loved it the way land deserves to be loved. And now we're building a life here. A real family. Not because we have to, because we choose to. She placed her hand on her belly. This baby will be the first Hale born on that mountain in 3 generations. And I'm asking you, let us stay. Let us build what August wanted, a home that lasts. She handed the journal to Judge Mercer. He read it silently, his face unreadable. When he looked up, Something had shifted in his expression. "Miss Hollis," he said, "do you have anything you'd like to say?" Vera stood slowly. She looked at the journal, at Ada, at her children sitting behind her. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. "I've spent this entire time being angry at Jonas for taking what I thought was mine. But hearing those words from Uncle August, hearing what he really wanted, I realize I've been fighting for the wrong thing." She looked at me. I wanted security, wanted a guarantee that my children would have a future, and I was so focused on getting that through inheritance that I forgot I could build it myself. Her voice cracked slightly. "You two don't need my forgiveness. But you have it, and if the offer still stands, I'd like to take that southern section, build my own cabin, be neighbors instead of enemies." The courtroom exploded in whispers. Judge Mercer banged his gavel. "Order." He looked at me. "Mr. Hale, do you consent to this proposal?" I stood, crossed to where Vera sat, extended my hand. "The offer stands. We share the land, build our homes side by side, raise our families as neighbors." Vera took my hand. Her grip was firm and desperate and grateful all at once. Judge Mercer nodded slowly. "Then I'm issuing the following ruling. The land will be divided. Northern section, where Jonas Hale's cabin currently stands, remains his property. Southern section goes to Vera Hollis with rights to build a homestead. Both parties will have legal claim. Both families will have a future." He banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned." The relief that washed through me was so intense I thought my legs might give out. Ada caught my arm, steadying me. "We won," she whispered. "We both won," I said, looking at Vera. And somehow, impossibly, it was true. 3 weeks after the hearing, a letter arrived. Official territorial seal. My hands shook opening it. Ada put down the dish she was washing. "What now?" she asked. I read it twice, then handed it to her, unable to speak. It was from the Territorial Governor's Office. A formal commendation for exemplary community building and land stewardship, and a land grant. An additional 20 acres on the eastern ridge, free and clear, because our case had exposed flaws in the property law, because we'd shown how family could be built, not just inherited, because someone in Helena thought what we were doing mattered. Ada stared at the letter, then at me. "We're not just keeping the land," she said slowly. "We're expanding it." I nodded, still stunned. "The mountain gives back," she whispered, "when you treat it right." Spring came late to the Tetons that year. The snow held on through April, as if testing whether we really meant to stay. But when it finally melted, it revealed a world transformed. Vera moved on to the southern section in early May. We spent 2 weeks helping her and the children build a cabin. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof and a stone fireplace. But it was solid, built to last. Lucy, Vera's daughter, turned out to have a gift for carpentry. She measured and cut with a precision that reminded me of Ada. Thomas was terrified of everything at first, jumping at every sound. But I taught him to set traps, and slowly he started to relax. Started to trust that this mountain might not kill him after all. We worked together, all of us. Ada cooked meals for everyone. Vera helped Ada with the garden. The children played in the clearing between our cabins. And slowly, without anyone quite noticing when it happened, we became something more than neighbors. We became family. Ada's pregnancy progressed. She was 6 months along now, her belly round and firm. She moved more carefully these days, but she never stopped working, never stopped pushing herself. It terrified me. Every time she climbed a ladder or lifted something heavy, the past clawed at me, trying to drag me under. But I'd learned to breathe through it, to trust her when she said she knew her limits. In late May, a woman arrived at our cabin. She was in her 60s, with silver-streaked black hair and calm eyes that had seen everything. "This is Helen," Ada said. "She's a midwife. She's going to stay with us until the baby comes." I looked at Ada. "You hired a midwife?" "I wrote to her 2 months ago, paid her with money from my mother's estate." She looked at me steadily. "I told you I'd survive this." I meant it. Helen sat up in the loft. She examined Ada with practiced hands, asking questions I didn't understand about pelvic measurements and fetal position. When she was done, she nodded with satisfaction. "You're built for this," she told Ada. "Strong hips, good muscle tone, baby's positioned well. If things go normally, you'll be fine." "And if they don't?" I couldn't help asking. "Then I've delivered 200 babies over 30 years. 12 of them breech, 10 of them in conditions worse than this." Helen looked at me with eyes that had seen too much fear to be impressed by mine. "Your wife will survive because she's stubborn and I'm good at my job. Now stop hovering and go chop wood or something useful." Ada laughed. It was a sound I'd been hearing more lately, deep and rich and real. The summer was the best time I could remember since before Sarah died. We worked hard, but the work felt different now, purposeful, building towards something instead of just surviving day to day. Vera's cabin took shape. We planted gardens that would feed both families. The children grew brown from sun and confident from freedom. Lucy started teaching Thomas to read. Thomas started teaching Lucy to fish. And at night, Ada and I would sit on our porch and watch the sunset paint the mountains in impossible colors. Sometimes we talked. About the baby. About names. About the future we were building. Sometimes we just sat in silence, her hand in mine, feeling the baby kick against her belly. I'd thought happiness was something that happened to other people, something I'd lost the right to when I failed Sarah. But here it was, quiet and steady and real. Not perfect, not easy, but earned. The baby came on a late August night during a surprise thunderstorm. Ada's water broke around midnight. She woke me calmly, her hand on my shoulder. "It's time," she said. I bolted upright, heart racing. Helen was already moving in the loft. She climbed down with her medical bag, her face alert but not worried. "How far apart are the contractions?" Helen asked. 10 minutes, maybe 12. Ada's voice was steady, but I could see pain tightening around her eyes. The storm intensified. Lightning cracked across the sky. Thunder shook the cabin walls. Rain hammered the roof in waves. "I'm going to get Vera," I said. "No time," Helen said. "Baby's coming faster than I expected." She looked at me. "I need you here. Can you do that?" 10 years tried to drag me under. The same storm, the same fear. But Ada's hand found mine. "Stay," she said. "I need you." So I stayed. The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. Ada labored with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just worked, breathing through contractions that made her whole body shake. Helen coached her through it, checked her progress, kept up a steady stream of calm instructions. But around hour 5, Helen's face tightened. "What?" I asked. "What's wrong?" "Baby's breech," Helen said quietly. The past clawed at me, trying to pull me down, but Ada's voice cut through. "Jonas, look at me." I looked. "I'm not dying. This baby is not dying. Do you hear me?" But Sarah was breech. "I'm not Sarah." Ada gripped my hand so hard I felt bones crunch. "Helen knows what she's doing. You need to let us do this. Can you do that?" I couldn't speak, could barely breathe, but I nodded. Helen moved into position. Vera appeared in the doorway, having braved the storm to check on us. She took one look at the situation and moved to Ada's other side. "What do you need?" Vera asked Helen. "Hot water, clean cloths, and someone to hold her hand while I turn this baby." What followed was the most terrifying thing I'd ever witnessed. Helen's hands worked with impossible skill, feeling through Ada's belly, manipulating the baby into position. Ada's face went white with pain, but she didn't scream, just breathed, focused, survived. It took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. But Helen got the baby turned. "Okay," Helen said. "Now the real work starts. Ada, when I tell you to push, you push with everything you've got." Ada nodded, sweat pouring down her face. The storm reached its peak as the baby crowned. Lightning and thunder and rain and Ada's labored breathing all mixing together into something primal and terrifying and beautiful. And then, As dawn light started filtering through the windows, a baby's cry split the air. "It's a girl," Helen said, her voice thick with emotion. She cleaned the baby quickly, wrapped her in a blanket, and placed her on Ada's chest. Ada looked down at the tiny red face, at the small fists waving in the air, at the proof that she'd survived what she said she would. "Hope," Ada said. "We'll call her Hope." I couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at this miracle. My daughter, alive, crying, perfect. Ada was bleeding, but not dangerously. Helen worked efficiently, delivering the afterbirth, checking for tears. When she was satisfied, she straightened and smiled. "You did good," she told Ada. "Both of you." Vera stepped forward, looking at the baby with wonder. "She's beautiful," Vera said softly. "You want to hold her?" Ada offered. Vera took Hope with trembling hands, and I saw something shift in her face. The hardness that had defined her for months softened. She looked at her own children, at Lucy and Thomas, who'd crept into the cabin to see the baby. "This is what family looks like," Vera said quietly. "Not blood, not inheritance, just people choosing to take care of each other." She handed Hope back to Ada. "Thank you," she said, "for sharing this mountain, for giving my children a home, for showing me what really matters." The storm passed, the sun rose, and in our cabin on the mountain that had tried so hard to break us, we sat together. Two families, one community, built from nothing but stubbornness and choice. 6 months later, I stood on the ridge at sunrise with Hope strapped to my chest. She grabbed at my beard with tiny fists, gurgling. Below, smoke rose from 2 chimneys. Ada was teaching Lucy to bake bread. Thomas was helping Vera split wood. "What do you think, Hope?" I said to my daughter. "Think you'll love this mountain?" She yawned, unimpressed. Made me laugh. Ada's voice drifted up. "Jonas! Breakfast!" I started down the trail. Hope fell asleep against my chest, her breath warm on my neck. The mountain had kept its promise. Not comfort, not ease, just the chance to build something real. And we'd taken it. Behind me the sun climbed higher. Ahead, family waited. I'd spent 10 years believing I didn't deserve this. Now I knew the truth. Nobody deserves it. You just work for it. Fight for it. Choose it every morning when you wake up and decide to stay. I reached the cabin. Ada took Hope, kissed her forehead, then mine. "Cold out there?" she asked. "Always is." "Then come inside. Food's getting cold." I followed her into the warmth, into the life we'd built from nothing but stubbornness and choice. The door closed behind me. Outside, the mountain waited, patient, eternal. Inside, we were home. The end. Word count, 18,247 words.